is that the classified information and unclassified, it's public, showed that our intelligence discovered that not that long ago, Iran had developed the supreme leader, now dead as fried chicken, but they have a new supreme leader, had developed a new game plan for their nuclear weapons program. And their game plan was to jack up missile, both ballistic and cruise missile production and drone production, and put together this huge stockpile of missiles and drones, at which point they would turn to the United States and Israel and the rest of the world and say, we're going to restart our nuclear weapons program. If you bomb us again like you did in June, we will destroy the Middle East. And by the way, our missiles can now reach Berlin and London and Paris. Is that my understanding of one of the reasons, the main reason we went into Iran?
I think that's pretty well articulated, Senator, that they were trying to use the umbrella of their established conventional stockpiles to blackmail the rest of the world in pursuit of their own nuclear weapons.
Now let's talk about Iran today. Can we agree that Iran, both the public and the private sector, is being held together right now with spit and duct tape?
Spit and duct tape is not a doctrinal term, Senator, but I would agree with something along those lines.
It's a Louisiana term. I mean, 7 out of 10 Iranians are out of work. We bombed their infrastructure. They've got 70% inflation. Their internet's shut off. You know better than I do what we've done on the military side. Their launchers, gone. Their missiles, for the most part, gone. Their drones, gone. Do they have some left? Yeah. Their Navy, gone. Their Air Force, gone. You can get in an airplane, you personally, and fly anywhere you want to across Iran right now and feel safe because they don't have any air defenses. It will be, in my opinion, 20 years and cost $1 trillion before they're even back somewhat to normal. And I don't have the slightest idea where they're going to get the money. If they think China's going to give it to them or Russia, they've got to learn a hard lesson. To that extent, have we achieved our objective in Iran?
Objective, as this president has stated from the beginning, is to ensure they don't get a nuclear weapon, and President Trump remains dedicated to ensuring that happens. And everything you described with the military degradation of their country was in service of ensuring they never get a nuclear weapon.
This is what I never understood the president to say, I want a regime change in Iran, and I want to obtain all of their fissile material. I've never heard him say that. What I heard him say was, I don't want to go back through it, but our goal is to cripple them so they can't blackmail the rest of the world. Now, many of my Democratic friends are now trying to say we have lost.
Picture this. You are watching the news. The United States Defense Secretary walks up to a microphone in front of the United States Senate, and he says, with a straight face, that America has finally done what no president before could do. He says the man in the White House showed courage unlike any leader in history. He says Iran's dream of getting a nuclear weapon is dead, gone, over forever. He says, quote, "We have the best negotiator in the world driving a great deal." Then a senator from Louisiana leans into his microphone, cracks a smile, and tells the room that Iran is, I am quoting him directly, being held together with duct tape and spit. He says we hit them so hard they are coughing up bones. The public sector, the private sector. He says he does not even know how Iran is still standing. The room laughs. Senators nod and lean back. It sounds like a victory lap. It sounds like the largest foreign policy crisis the Middle East has seen in decades has been settled, boxed up, and placed on a shelf. Mission complete. Turn off the lights. Time to move on. But here is the part that nobody in that hearing room is laughing about. The blockade is still running. The U.S. Navy is still stopping ships in the Persian Gulf around the clock. A USF/A-18 Super Hornet, a combat aircraft, fired a 20-millimeter cannon into the hull of an Iranian oil tanker to physically disable it. Not a warning shot, a cannon, into the hull. That happened in broad daylight. More than 100 vessels have been redirected, boarded, or seized. Iran is still firing at U.S. Navy ships. Missiles are still going up. And in a tiny set of islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean, islands most Americans have genuinely never heard of, a massive financial deal is quietly being cooked up that could cost American taxpayers billions of dollars. Not this year alone. Every single year for the next 99 years. If Iran is destroyed and the war is essentially won, why is all of this still happening? That is the question nobody on cable news is sitting with long enough to make it uncomfortable. We are going to do that today, because this story is not just about Iran. It is about what victory actually means, and who ends up paying for it when the victory turns out to be not quite what they sold you. Let us start with what actually happened in recent weeks, because the official story and the on-the-ground reality do not match up at all. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stood before House lawmakers in May and told them on the record that the ceasefire with Iran remains in effect, even as he also acknowledged in the very same testimony that there had been recent exchanges of fire. Read that again. The ceasefire is in effect, he said, but there are exchanges of fire. That is not a ceasefire. That is a word being used to describe something that is not actually happening, in a room full of people who are paid to notice the difference. Hegseth even defined it out loud. Ceasefire means the fire is ceasing, he said, as if saying it would make it true. Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Kane put the actual numbers on it. Since the ceasefire was announced in April, Iran has fired at commercial vessels 9 times, seized 2 container ships, and attacked U.S. military forces more than 10 times. 10 direct attacks on American forces during an active ceasefire. And yet, officially, the ceasefire remains in effect. On the water, the situation is even harder to spin. The U.S. Navy is running a full maritime enforcement campaign. Over 100 ships have been stopped, redirected, or boarded. A Navy F/A-18 fired 20-millimeter cannon rounds into an Iranian tanker's rudder to disable it at sea. Multiple tankers disabled in single weeks. Iran said it reopened the Strait of Hormuz. Come on through, Iran said. The waterway is open. The United States said, it does not matter. The blockade stays in full force.
Day in a row, firing back against Poles.
Senator Chris Coons said it clearly during the hearing. He was worried the United States had achieved a series of tactical successes, but was on the verge of a strategic loss. Tactical wins, strategic drift, and a bill that keeps climbing by the day. The cost of the Iran war has already crossed $29 billion, according to the Pentagon's own chief financial officer. And that is before you count long-term base costs, equipment replacement, or what it takes to keep tens of thousands of troops and an entire carrier strike group deployed indefinitely in the region. Trump himself said openly that there is no time frame on the Iran war. No time frame. On a conflict being sold to the public as effectively finished. And Hegseth is simultaneously asking Congress for a $1.5 trillion Pentagon budget, the largest defense spending request in American history, while standing in front of senators who cannot get a straight answer on when the war ends. Now let us talk about what this means for you personally, because this is not an abstract foreign policy debate. This is your gas tank, your grocery bill, and your government's financial choices. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most economically important waterways on the face of the earth. Around 20 to 25% of all the oil traded globally passes through that narrow stretch of water. When that strait is under military pressure, when tankers are being disabled, ships are being rerouted, and Navy jets are flying combat patrols, the global oil market does not stay calm. It gets nervous fast. And when oil markets get nervous, prices go up. Brent crude was trading above $114 per barrel during the period of these hearings. That number does not stay in the Persian Gulf. It travels. It shows up at your gas pump within days. It feeds into the cost of food because every item in your grocery store was moved by trucks that run on fuel. It feeds into freight costs, shipping costs, and the price of practically everything you buy. Senator Patty Murray put it to Hegseth in plain terms during the hearing. You are spending families' hard-earned tax dollars on a war that many strongly oppose, and you are forcing people to pay more at the pump. And yet, she said, you are not providing a real breakdown of what this war is actually costing. Hegseth answered rhetorically, what is the cost of Iran getting a nuclear weapon? That is a fair question in a general sense, but it is not a budget. A rhetorical question is not a line item, and American families pay in actual dollars, not rhetorical ones. There is also the direct connection to the deficit that almost never gets discussed. A $1.5 trillion defense request goes on to the national debt. Every dollar there is a dollar that is not available for healthcare, student debt, roads, schools, or housing. These are not separate pools. They are the same pool of resources, and someone is deciding how to divide it. That decision is being made right now in hearing rooms on Capitol Hill with very little honest public accounting. Now here is where the story gets sharper. It is not just about what is happening now, it is about what they said before, and how different that looks from what they are doing today. When the UK government signed an agreement to transfer the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, islands in the Indian Ocean where the US and UK share a major military base at Diego Garcia, the United States State Department issued a formal statement of support. The US supports the United Kingdom's decision to proceed with the Chagos Agreement, it said. Rules-based order, sovereignty, decolonization, all the right language, public, official, on the record. At the same time, credible mainstream reporters were warning that there was no easy exit from the Iran conflict. No silver bullet was the phrase that kept appearing. Iran was unlikely to accept any deal that did not allow it to tell its own people it had not simply crumbled under American pressure. The blockade, as structured, was giving Tehran no face-saving off-ramp, which meant the war would continue to grind, the cost would continue to grow, and the victory narrative would keep running ahead of the actual situation. And now look at what is actually happening. Trump went public and told the United Kingdom, do not give away Diego Garcia. He posted it on Truth Social in capital letters. Do not give away Diego Garcia. He called the plan to hand over the islands a blight on our great ally. He said the UK must remain strong in the face of wokeism. He warned the US might need Diego Garcia specifically to strike Iran if peace talks broke down. Britain, which had already signed and agreed to the sovereignty transfer, froze the entire deal because Washington said so and London complied. Then the leaks came. Reports from The Telegraph, picked up by Reuters and news outlets worldwide, said the White House was now considering buying the Chagos Islands directly from Mauritius. Not a lease, not renegotiating what Britain had already agreed to, buying the islands outright. The United States, the country that co-led the global coalition defending Ukraine's territorial sovereignty, the country that regularly lectures on the rules-based international order, was reportedly exploring whether it could write a check to purchase an archipelago belonging to a sovereign nation of fewer than 2 million people, just to secure a military base it already uses. Mauritius replied in exactly one sentence. Its sovereignty over the Chagos archipelago is non-negotiable. The financial numbers attached to Diego Garcia deserve a moment of attention. The UK-Mauritius deal that Trump effectively torpedoed would have cost Britain around £101 million per year on average over a 99-year lease. In the early years, the payments were closer to £165 million annually. The total estimated cost in today's money was roughly £3.4 billion. Now here is what matters for American taxpayers. If the United States takes on any form of that financial commitment directly or funds some alternative arrangement, that cost does not land on the UK. It lands on you, on taxpayers who are simultaneously being told there is no money for domestic spending. And this entire negotiation is happening almost entirely outside public view. The Chatham House think tank, one of the most respected foreign policy research institutions in the world, described it plainly in analysis from earlier this year. Washington is willing to pay enormous political and financial costs to maintain its Indian Ocean military presence at Diego Garcia. The question they raised, and it is exactly the right question, is whether the American public ever gets an honest accounting of what those costs actually are. The answer so far appears to be no. Here is something worth knowing about how this story is being covered, because the framing affects what people think is going on. Right-leaning news is giving you toughness and security. Iran is crushed. China must not get near Diego Garcia. The blockade is smart leverage, and any British move to hand over the islands is weakness. What you are almost certainly not getting is the least cost breakdown, the blockade's impact on oil prices, the $29 billion war tab and climbing, or the history of the Chagassian people, the people who were forcibly removed from those islands over 50 years ago to make room for the base, and who are still fighting for the right to go home. Left-leaning outlets are giving you human cost, escalation risk, and questions about whether maximum pressure on Iran has any realistic endgame. What you are likely not getting is a careful breakdown of the Diego Garcia financial commitment and how it connects directly to your household budget and to what gets cut when the defense budget climbs. The center press, your wire services, your AP, your public broadcasting outlets, is giving you accurate facts. Hegseth testified. The blockade continues. A deal is being discussed somewhere. That is accurate and useful, but it is not connecting these separate pieces into the full picture for you. Almost no one is handing you all of it at once. The victory speeches sitting next to the active naval war, the sovereignty lectures sitting next to the island purchase plan, and the straight line from those choices to your gas pump and your government's budget decisions. That is the story, and it is sitting right there in publicly available sources for anyone who goes looking. Serious analysts are not being quiet about what they see. Credible mainstream reporting has made the point without ambiguity. There may be no clean exit from this conflict. Iran will not accept a deal that does not allow it to claim it did not simply fold under American pressure. The blockade, as currently structured, gives Tehran nothing to work with on that front. So the pressure holds, the war holds, the cost holds, and the victory speeches keep coming while the bill keeps growing. Chatham House adds a layer that almost nobody on television is touching. The Diego Garcia base exists because Britain forcibly removed the entire indigenous Chagosian population from the islands in the late 1960s and early 1970s to make room for a military facility. Those people were told their removal was temporary. They were promised they could come back. More than 50 years later, they still have not been allowed to return to the islands where their families lived for generations. That history, an act of displacement for the sake of military convenience, is now crashing directly into a $29 billion Iran war, a $1.5 trillion defense budget request, and a reported plan by the most powerful nation on earth to purchase an island that other people were cleared off of to make room for American power. That is the full picture, and it deserves to be seen whole, not in fragments. So here is where we are. The defense secretary says Iran is finished. A senator jokes it is held together with duct tape and spit. Congress applauds. The story sounds clean and done. But the blockade is still running. U.S. jets are still disabling tankers with cannon fire. Congress cannot get a timeline on when the war ends. The Pentagon is asking for $1.5 trillion. A tiny archipelago in the Indian Ocean is one of the most contested geopolitical flashpoints in the world right now, and a small sovereign nation of fewer than 2 million people is being told, quietly, that its territory might be purchasable by the same country that just spent years leading the world in lectures about sovereignty and the rules-based order. None of that sounds like a finished victory. It sounds like a victory that is still being bought and paid for, in installments, quietly, by people who were never asked if they wanted to buy it in the first place. Everything I shared with you today is publicly available and checkable right now. the PBS House hearing on YouTube, NBC's live Senate coverage, the Forbes clip of Kennedy's exchange, Al Jazeera's Iran war reporting, Hindustan Times on the Chagos purchase reports, BBC, Reuters, AP, Chatham House. Every source is there for you to go read yourself. This is my own personal analysis built from those public sources. I genuinely encourage you to go check them, read the original reporting, and form your own independent conclusion. My only ask is this. The next time someone in a suit tells you a war is over, a base is worth whatever it costs, and your country simply cannot afford to take care of you at home, ask them to show you the full bill, not the headline, the actual bill, because somebody is always paying it, and it is rarely the people doing the talking. If you want to keep going deeper on stories like this, the ones that draw a straight line from Washington decisions to your daily life, hit like, share this with someone who needs to see it, and drop a comment below. Tell me which part landed hardest for you. The ceasefire that is not a ceasefire. The sovereignty lecture from a country reportedly trying to buy an island it does not own. The $1.5 trillion war with no time frame and no endgame. Tell me below. I read every single comment. See you in the next one.